Today on episode 13 of the Play Guitar Podcast, I talk about why the minor pentatonic scale works so well, when it shouldn't. Also, we have some listener feedback and another installment of Creating the Band, so stay tuned. Welcome to episode 13 of the Play Guitar Podcast. I'm Lee, and this is the podcast that's determined to make you a better guitar player. No matter if you're just starting out or you've been playing for years, this is the show that'll help you become the guitarist you always wanted to be. On tonight's episode, that's right, I said tonight. This is one of my nighttime episodes. I just couldn't get to it this morning, but it's nice trying this out in the late evening, shall we say. On this episode, it's titled The Minor Pentatonic Scale, You're Already Playing Outside. I start to unravel a big topic that most new lead guitarists don't think of right away. We are all taught that matching your scales to chords is the way to go. We spend a lot of time learning scale patterns and fitting them just right to play over chords and chord progressions. This is great, and it gets us all to work. The scale pattern that most guitarists learn first is the minor pentatonic scale. We're told to put up, a blues background track, play the minor pentatonic scale in the key of the track, and go to town. Start playing. It sounds great, and in a split second, you feel like Eric Clapton. But further on down the road, did you catch that? When you really start learning about why scales work, something just doesn't compute. Didn't all those blues tunes that helped me practice the minor pentatonic scale use major type chords? They use either major triads or the dominant seventh chords. They all have a major third in the chord. But the minor pentatonic scale with its minor third, it shouldn't work. The third degree is the special note. It determines whether we have either a minor or a major scale or chord in the first place. This shouldn't work, but it does. Why does this work? We're going to explore this today and also talk about other ways to use scales that don't quite work over our chord progressions. Letting the minor pentatonic scale point us in a new direction with some new sounds. So also later on, I have some listener feedback, and I'm also starting to work on the form of the first song in Creating the Band. A few other things. Today, I'm recording on my new mixer. It's a PreSonus Studio Live AR12 USB. It's very cool, and it was very easy to set up. I was a bit worried, though, because after I purchased it, I saw there were several people online that were having some issues with this mixer. And that's to be expected with anything nowadays. But as I waited for it to arrive, I was hoping I wasn't going to have new gear nightmare. So far, it's been great. I've got my mic pre, which is a DBX 286S. It's a mic pre and processor. It's plugged into the mixer. I hit record, and so far it's working great. There's no weird noises that other people have complained of. So hopefully things stay this way. I'm holding on to the box just in case, though. I've got it right back here just in case things go wrong. But so far, everything's pretty good. Some of the benefits of this mixer is that I'll be able to bring my pedal board and my amps into the show. I just need one more piece of gear to do that, which is still on back order. It's a Moore Radar Impulse pedal, and I'll have a video showing how I set this up in the near future. Another benefit is I'll be able to record interviews right here on the podcast. I didn't set out for this show to be an interview type show. But if it's someone who I think has a story who could benefit all of you, I'd be happy to do it. So anyway, that's something that's been on my mind, maybe doing some interviews for the show. Thanks to everyone who sent in questions and comments this week. And thanks for being patient with me. I'm still playing a little catch up, but I'm there. After today, everything's back to normal. So I haven't been able to respond as quickly as I'd like to, but it looks like there should be smooth sailing ahead. if you remember a few episodes ago, I let you know about an opportunity that came my way for a one-on-one conversation and a YouTube spot with Pat Flynn. And I've been in contact and with them over there, and the one-on-one conversation is coming up real soon, and I should find out then about the video spot, and I'll let you all know when it's about to happen. And last, I'm still planning my videos for YouTube in the near future. Let me know at feedback@playguitarpodcast.com or on Twitter at playguitarpdcst if you have any ideas you would like to see me put up on video. I'd be happy to help. So thanks for joining me today, and let's go ahead and get into the main topic. The minor pentatonic scale. You're already playing outside. The minor pentatonic scale has been the first scale most players learn when they start playing lead guitar. It sounds great in many styles of popular music. It's the most important scale for blues, funk, and rock, but it also sounds awesome in other types of popular music. For example, check out Stevie Ray Vaughan playing on David Bowie's song, Let's Dance. It's a very poppy song. And Stevie's got this kind of Albert King style playing, very tasteful. It's only in certain parts of the songs, but it just takes the song to another level. The minor pentatonic scale is fun and easy when you learn pattern 1, the boxy looking one. You can slide it around into different keys and playing it over different songs is simple, and you get a lot back for a small investment of practicing. And the only time it gets challenging is when you start to learn the whole scale in all its patterns across the whole neck. But it's no doubt my students' favorite scale to learn and play. But later, when you've moved along with the guitar, when you start really digging into matching scales and chords, you start to see that something just isn't right. Most just learn the patterns and they don't worry about what the notes they're playing. But today we're going to take a look at the minor pentatonic scale. We're going to see what it is, where to use it, how to play it over dominant seventh chords. And we're also going to learn all about something called playing outside. I started learning to play jazz guitar a few years after I started learning guitar. I loved rock and blues music, and that was what I concentrated on first. But after a while, I had an opportunity to play in a jazz band, and I wanted to learn about this kind of music on the guitar. And one of the things I noticed quickly was that the chord structures were different than the music that I'd been playing. Where in blues and rock, the chord progressions mostly use the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord, I found that in jazz, the most common chord progression was the 2 chord to the 5 chord to the 1 chord. Just saying that, it doesn't sound like a big difference, but honestly, it's huge. The whole thinking and the choices you make are different. They're not better or worse, they're just different. And I needed to understand the way the 2, 5, 1 progression worked, and I needed to know fast. I started playing the standard way that you're taught when you learn jazz to play over 2, 5, 1s. But before long, I was wanting to go a bit farther. I found that when you progress a bit with 2, 5, 1 chord progressions, you start to see that playing over the 5 chord, that's the place where you can really go nuts. You can add a lot of tension by the choice of scales that you play over it. I thought that this was really fun, and I wanted to be able to use some of these sounds I was getting in my blues and my rock playing. In blues and rock, I used dominant 7th chords all the time, usually with a minor pentatonic scale over them. So I started to take a closer look at these 7th chords and what I was playing over them. Once I understood what I was already doing, I thought I'd be able to bring some of these other scales over and see if they sounded good. Well, taking a closer look at the minor pentatonic scale, it had a profound effect on my guitar playing. It still is to this day. I found I was playing something wrong. The dominant 7th chords I was playing had a major third in all of them. And the scale that I love so much, the minor pentatonic scale, it didn't. In fact, it had the minor third. It was a note that was 1 fret away from the chord note, the major third. If you've ever played 2 notes like this, a half step apart at the same time, even on a piano where you play the the white key and the black key that are right next to each other at the same time, you'll understand my surprise. That's a very tense sound. And I didn't catch it. It just sounded normal to me on the blues. So I thought that if you can play a minor third over a seventh chord that has a major third in it, in blues and in rock, why couldn't you go even further like I was in my jazz studies? So let's take a look at what I went through next. If you've listened or read my blog post about the big four scales, I go into a lot of detail about the minor pentatonic scale. In short, it's a 5-note scale that's used a lot. The notes that the minor pentatonic scale uses are the 1, the flat 3, the 4, the 5, and the flat 7. So in the key of C, you would have a C, an E flat, an F, a G, and a B flat. Take notice of the E flat, which is the flat third, and the B flat, which is the flat 7th. We can use this scale in many different circumstances. It works great over minor chords and minor chord progressions, but we also play it a lot over major triads with dominant 7th chords in the blues. I'll demonstrate both, but I want to talk about these dominant 7th chords a little bit. 7th chords have a bit of tension to them naturally. They tend to sound like they want to go to another chord. They want to move on. They don't feel grounded. And that might be the reason why we like them so much and we use them in so many songs. They have a little tension to them. You can get away with a lot when you play scales over dominant 7th chords. You can play a dominant scale or a Mixolydian mode that fits perfectly over the chord. You can also play a major pentatonic scale, and that fits perfectly too. You can't use a full major scale though over it, because the major scale uses a major 7th, where the dominant 7th has a flat 7th note. But later on, we'll talk about some ways to get around that major 7th thing. But you can also use many other scales over it with different degrees of tension, but the most common is the minor pentatonic scale. Let's talk about the chord. The notes in a dominant 7th chord are the 1, 3, 5, and flat 7. That's what makes it dominant, that flat 7th note. So in the key of C, that would be C, E, G, and B flat. Now, if you were to play that chord and use the C minor pentatonic scale over it that we talked about, they would match in every way except for that one note, the third. The dominant chord has an E, or the major third, and the minor pentatonic scale has an E flat, or a minor third. That flat third note doesn't fit over this chord. It creates a very hard sound. And I'm going to get my guitar and demonstrate that for you right here. So here is the pentatonic scale. Now here's the note. This is the minor third. Hear how that doesn't quite work. Now some will push it a little bit. Kind of bend that minor third up closer to the major third to make it sound a little bit better. So what we're doing here is we're playing a note that's outside the tonic sound. It's a wrong note, but it sounds bluesy. It sounds good. I thought, aha, when I first figured this out, how does this happen? Why does this work? Is this what they call playing outside? I knew how to go outside and play, but I had no idea how to play music outside. I wanted to know more about this. Playing outside is simple. It's just playing notes that are not in the tone structure, wrong notes. It's easy to do this. Put on a backing track, play any note you want. Just play random notes on the fretboard. Terrible. Sounds awful. But the more you listen to advanced guitar players, the more you start to hear that they're playing something different. They've got some sounds that you just can't get from your inside sounding scales. Yep, they're playing wrong notes. Well, why then, when they play the wrong notes, why does it sound so good? And when I play them, why does it sound terrible? So we need to treat this new skill a little differently than just learning inside sounding scales. playing the pentatonic minor scale over the major triads and the seventh chords that we just played, it's our first step to playing outside scales. There's a reason that I didn't realize that this was even happening when I was first playing the blues. It's because the sound is so common that my ears were adjusted to it. Take players like Robin Ford or Larry Carlton, for example. They are so in tune with these tense sounding outside sounds, like we are for the minor pentatonic sounds, that scale over seventh chords. They're so in tune with that their solos can seamlessly go from consonant, inside sounding sounds into tension and then back. It's the confidence that they have in playing the outside notes that make it work. And the effect on everyone else, the effect on the listener is, hey, what's that? I don't know what that was, but I know I liked it. The fact that we know what the sound of the flat third over the seventh chord is, and it's relatively easy to learn how to resolve that tension, that it makes it so cool sounding. So what are some other ways to play outside sounding scales? The first would be the blues scale. It's different than the minor pentatonic scale. But basically, all the blues scale is the minor pentatonic scale with an added extra note. So let me play the blues scale. This is the C blues scale, by the way, for you. You hear that extra note? It's between the fourth and fifth of the scale. We add a chromatic tone. You could call the note the sharp 4 or the flat 5. Either way, it's the note that's between the fourth and fifth notes of the scale. Here it is. There it is, right there. You hear the tension in that note? It's great for adding tension outside the key because it's a half step, just one fret away from two very strong notes, the fourth and the fifth. It gives a very cool sound that really wants to resolve. You feel it pulling to that note. You could even go. You hear it pulling the other way this time. It's such a strong sound that you're distracted. You don't really notice that it's outside the key. Pretty cool. And it's easy to do because you just take your pentatonic scales that you already know and add one note in there. The next way you could start learning to play a little bit outside would be approach notes. Approach notes are pretty easy too. Just like getting that flat 5 from the blues scale, you can play a note a half step above or below your intended note of the scale and then resolve it to give a strong sense of tension and release. Here's an example of approach notes. Okay, we'll use that same C7 chord and the same scale, minor pentatonic. I'm going to pick this note here, which is a C, and I'm going to play a note one half step behind it. Now, when I resolve that, I go from a wrong note to a right note, tension and release. So that was a whole bunch of notes underneath. Now I'm going to try it again. This time I'm going to play some notes a half step above the scale notes. See what that sounds like. Did you hear that one? There was another one right above the C. those little wrong notes a half step above. They sound, is it a great sound? I wouldn't say so, but sometimes it might be just the thing you need to add a little tension to your line. Well, the next way to practice playing outside, this is a favorite for many, many players. And this one, we're just going to take the whole scale and we're going to shift it a half step up or down before resolving it to the main inside scale. The pentatonic scale works great for this, but you can use it for any scale. And you can try moving it up different ways too. Some people like to move that pentatonic scale, up a minor third, 3 half steps, or up 6 halves, up to a flat 5, 6 half steps up. You get different results for each, but then you always want to resolve it back to the original scale so you have some sort of frame of reference. Here, let's give that one a shot. So this first time, we're going to start with the minor pentatonic scale. Then the next, we're going to add that same scale a half step below, and then resolve it back to the minor pentatonic in C. So here we go. I threw one above that time too, so that you could shift the scale a half step behind or a half step above, and you'll get some outside sounds. Does it always sound so great? No, not always. But the more you do it, the better you're going to sound at it, and it may just be what you need. Some other scales that you can use to get an outside sound are the diminished scale, the whole tone scale, the altered scale. The diminished and whole tone scales are types of symmetrical scales, and that makes them easy to build, not so easy to play. The diminished scale is built with a series of half step and whole steps. Half, whole, half, whole, half, whole, or whole, half, whole, half, whole, half. And you would start on either the half or the whole for different uses of the scale. The diminished scale is very tense, and it's great for playing over seventh chords, starting with the half. So we'll start with minor pentatonic again, then into diminished. Diminished. Minor. That's the sound of going from the pentatonic scale into the diminished scale to get a little tension, a little outside sounds. The whole tone scale, it's built with all whole steps as well. Whole, 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 whole is a very dreamy, floaty sound. It's great to add a bit of tension without getting too far away from the chord tone. So let's take a listen to the whole tone scale. So we'll do a little minor pentatonic and try a little whole tone. It's got kind of a dreamier sound. It's a little, it's kind of dreamy and floaty, and it does add a lot of tension from the chord tones. There's another one that's called the altered scale, and it's a mode of the melodic minor scale, and mode meaning that you take the original scale but change the starting note to a different note in the scale. In this case, the altered scale, it starts with the 7th degree of the melodic minor scale, and it combines the sounds of the diminished and the whole tone scale. So let's take a listen to that. Just like all the other times, we'll start with minor pentatonic. Minor pentatonic. Altered. Altered. This was just an overview of some of the ways that you could start playing a little outside over dominant seventh chords. I will go over each of these cool scales in upcoming podcasts. So what if you tried some of these sounds out? They probably would sound pretty awkward the first time you play them. It's not easy to be confident playing sounds that are out of the key right away. So here's a tip to make this transition a little bit easier. When starting out with outside sounds, I always say that it's more important to know when you're playing as opposed to what you're playing. Rhythm has a lot to do with getting these sounds under your fingers. Try slipping into some of these sounds for a few beats at the end of a 4 or 8 bar phrase. That's the place we're used to hearing a lot of tension in a song. Like where you would hear the 5 chord just about to resolve to the 1 chord right at the end. And that way you have a strong consonant sound at the beginning and resolve to a strong consonant sound in the next phrase. The tension is right at the end before something new comes along. The minor pentatonic scale has been the scale to play for so many guitarists. It doesn't require a lot of thinking. Just learn the pattern and go. But if you spend some time really looking at the way it's played, it can open up a whole new world in your soloing. It's the gateway to adding good tension to your lines and getting your ear to open up to new sounds that can take your playing further than you ever thought. Today I showed you how the minor pentatonic scale uses tension to create some interest over a 7th chord. I also introduced some other ways to add tension to your solos. If you start experimenting with these tense sounds, remember, use them like you would spices in your cooking. Just use a little at first. A little of this definitely goes a long way. My question for you is, do you use outside sounds in your playing? If so, what's your favorite scale or technique to use? I would love to hear it. This is listener feedback. This is where if you have a comment or a question that I can help you with, I'll try my best to help. To get in touch, you can always email me at feedback@playguitarpodcast.com. Use the comments on the show notes page or use the contact form on the site. But the coolest way to leave a question for the show is by my SpeakPipe voicemail. When you go to the main page of playguitarpodcast.com, to the right of the screen, you'll see a button. It says send voicemail. That will allow you to record a short message for me to use on the show. You can also get to this voicemail on my contact page as well. Lots of great questions and comments this week. I had an awesome email from Joseph from Sweden. Hey, and he is interested in hearing an episode about getting different tones for different styles of music and maybe some amp settings to get in the ballpark of those tones. Another suggestion he's had is about soloing in different styles of music and what chords and scales in different styles. He also expressed interest in Play Guitar Academy. So great suggestions. I'm creating a podcast schedule for the rest of the year right now, and I'm going to try to put both of your ideas in for future episodes. And thank you for your interest in the Academy, Play Guitar Academy. That's on the way. I have a roadmap that I've been working on perfecting for the past 4 years. It takes you from never touching guitar before all the way to a gigging musician. And I use that with my small group students and I always thought it would be perfect for an internet video academy. I'm going to have to adjust some things for the video stuff, but I'm really excited about it. I usually mention the waiting list for that at the end of each show, but when I get closer to the opening, I'll start keeping you informed about it at the beginning of the show. So thank you very much, Jusu. I had a great question from Andy about what's the most efficient way to work out the key when a progression does not start with chord 1. Most of the time, a song will end with the 1 chord. And most of the time, a song will also begin with the 1 chord. So if you have the same chord at the beginning and at the end, that's a safe bet that that's the strong chord of the key. But it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes the songwriter will use other chords for starting and ending the song for an effect. That means you've got some work to do. We've gone over it in other podcasts how chords are constructed and their function in the song. The strongest chord progression is a 5 chord to a 1 chord. If you have an idea that the song may be in a certain key, see if you can find a few 5 chord to 1 chord progressions in the song. In the key of C, you might see a lot of G's or G7s going to C. That could be a hint. Sometimes the chords are so all over the place that I'll try to play some scales over top of these chords to see which one fits the best. That's another tip. So if you think it might be in the key of, say, D, try playing a D major scale over it and see if it sounds right. At first, tough songs can be a real pain and quite a guessing game, but just keep at it. The more time you spend trying to find song keys, the better you get at it. And if you're stumped, don't be afraid to ask. I'm happy to help. So thanks, Andy. Appreciate it. Chris sent in a great email and commented on a post on Twitter this week. He had some very nice things to say, and he said he was familiar with the diatonic chords that we went into last week. And he's also having fun practicing with 3-note per string scales. They're a lot of fun. After one of my students is confident with the 5 pattern scales, and we went over those a few weeks ago, I start them on 7 pattern 3-note per string scales. They're a lot of fun, and they can get you around the guitar neck very quickly. Thanks, Chris. I asked a question on Twitter earlier on the week about what was one thing you wish you'd known before you started learning guitar. And it was crickets for a while. And then I got one response from Charles. Thank you, Charles. He said he wished he would have started a lot sooner. So that's good advice. Thank you, Charles, for responding. Carlos is looking for recommendations for a practice amp for a semi-hollow guitar. I see a lot of students with the Fender Champion 20 and the Fender Mustang. I think it's Fender Mustang 1 or I or what. But they all seem to be very good practice amps. I also recommend the Roland Cube 10GX. I let them know about that. But what practice amps would you recommend? There are a lot of them out there. I've played a good bit of them, but I've nowhere near played all of them. So let us know which practice amp you like the best. And thanks, Carlos. I also received an email from Wayne, and Wayne had some wonderful things to say about the show. Thank you so much, Wayne. He has been playing for about a month, and he shared his experience and some ideas he has. With everything he described about his practice routine, it sounds like he started out on the right track to me. Spending time with the technique type exercises and chords and chord progressions, they're the key at the stage of learning guitar that you're at. I always recommend taking your time and staying focused at this stage of playing. It's important stuff, but you don't think it is at this stage. Your mind is filled with all the cool things you would like to be able to do, but these initial things are so important. Take a C chord, for instance. The C chord is the first chord I ever learned a long time ago. And I am consistently playing the C chord every time I'm at a gig. It's the same one I learned, I think, when I was 12 years old. I don't think I've ever had a gig where I didn't have to play a C chord ever. The things that you are learning now are not just kid stuff that you'll never use again. It's not flashy, but it's important. Don't be distracted by all the cool things that are out there to learn. To properly learn all those things, they assume that you already have a strong foundation in the guitar. Just keep at it. Spend the time on these things. You will be glad you did. Thank you, Wayne, and congratulations on beginning your guitar journey. Let's get into creating the band. This is where I share with you each week every step it takes to start from scratch, from just an idea in my head all the way through to the working band with an album, videos, with all that stuff. So, okay, slow but sure is how things have been going. I've got my new mixer in place and I'm back to working on these songs. And today I made some progress on the number one song. I've rethought the bass part. It was very sparse the way I had it before. In fact, I may have even taken it off for what I played for you before. I wanted to make the bass part something that filled up the space a little bit more. So I muted everything, all the guitar parts, everything but the drums. And I came up with a new part that locks to the bass drum a lot more. I also have most of the form of the song down. I've got an intro, verse 1, chorus 1, verse 2, chorus 2. All I have left to do is I need some sort of a B section or a solo section, or maybe both. And then a last chorus within some sort of an outro. I also did a scratch solo over the intro. It's a little busy, but it'll work. I'll work on it some more. I mean, it sounds okay. So here we go. Here's what I've got so far. So I'll stop it right there. That is the intro, verse, and the chorus. So I also have another verse and another chorus, but it just sounds the same as those other two. So you get the idea. So I'm getting somewhere. I'm going to finish out the form of the song next week, and I'm going to start on melody and lyrics. So let me know what you think. I'd love to hear from you. So that's a wrap. Thanks for joining me today for the Play Guitar Podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to the show on iTunes or in your podcast player. Also, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave an iTunes review for the show. If you're interested in online lessons, go on over to playguitaracademy.com and join my early adopter list to get news on the opening of the site and an early adopter discount. Also, follow me on all of my different social media pages. Links to them are at www.playguitarpodcast.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next episode.